Two new Death Guard models unveiled today. Let's take a look at some new and brutally practical looking Death Guard Praetors. Hello and welcome back to Horus Tactics, where today I thought we'd just take a quick look at two fun new Death Guard miniatures. Games Workshop seems to be following suit with its Praetors for each of the Horus Heresy legions, and now the Death Guard are getting theirs. I feel like through most of this whole miniature series they've been really hitting the mark for each of the legions' aesthetics, and most of the time they're units that are very relevant to both 30k and 40k. Fun new sculpts for the Chaos legions are a bit of a rarity in 40k, and they can be a nice way to add just a little bit more theme to the army. Here are their two miniatures in their grim and dour glory: a cataphractile Terminator armoured Praetor armed with a great big axe, and then a power armoured one armed with a power scythe. Both of them are relatively plain and practical looking, fairly plain and unadorned compared with some of the more blingy ones of the other legions. The Terminator one has a interesting looking cowled head that you can swap out for a helmeted version. He appears to have a sensor hanging off him and a fair bit of battle damage modelled onto the actual model itself. You can see a few chips, say, in the leg armour, and both of them seem to be sporting a little bit of chainmail as well. Kind of interesting to see it looking a bit more intact and properly maintained. I guess by the time 10,000 years has passed, in 41st millennium you'd more likely to see the ragged scraps that remains from what this was to start with. I must admit, I think they've done pretty well with both of these models. They look very heavily armoured and imposing, both of them, and they do look like a natural precursor to the Plague Marine type units that you might see on the battlefields of the 41st millennium. I think perhaps my favourite of the two is the power armoured one. He just seems like a really nicely balanced miniature, and is looking very Death Guard indeed with that great big power scythe and the iron armour. Both of the kits are part of that same Horus Heresy Praetor range coming from Forge World. There have been a few plastic 30k characters coming out, but still it looks like the majority of the Praetor line is still being sculpted in Forge World resin. Generally seem to be a bit of a negative compared with plastic kits for the most part. One downside tends to be the price. As Games Workshop's prices have spiralled higher, it is maybe a little bit less of a disparity. If we go by the previous prices for the Praetor miniatures, the Terminator one is likely to be $48.50, £31 or €38.50, and the power armoured one will likely be $42, £26 or €33. A bit more pricey than Games Workshop would usually sell these character miniatures for, though I will admit that the sculpts are pretty nice ones. Obviously this pair are mainly aimed at the Horus Heresy range, but a lot of people do tend to like picking them up for 40k purposes too. I guess the Death Guard ones have a bit more stiff competition given all of their decent range support compared with armies like Word Bearers or Alpha Legion that basically have nothing. Out of these, I feel like the Terminator Praetor would make a pretty nice stand-in for a Lord of Contagion if you prefer this aesthetic to the standard one. I believe that currently the only Lord of Contagion option is that Lord Felthius one along with the Blight Lord Terminators, and admittedly weirdly it is cheaper than this guy even with the extra Terminators in tow, though the aesthetic really is quite different and a bit more cartoony perhaps. For 40k the power armoured one is perhaps a little bit awkward rules wise, as you can't equip a Foot Lord with a Man Reaper or anything. I guess maybe the closest equivalent might be a Foot Lord with a Bale Sword perhaps, though you could probably still just get away with it as a Lord of Contagion provided you explain carefully beforehand that it does count as Terminator armour, I guess. Otherwise, Games Workshop did show us a few different other pictures of the miniatures, a couple of pictures of the backs and capes of the models. It's kind of interesting to see Death Guard actually bedecked in something that's fairly nice and clean, though it's kind of interesting that they've painted the edges of the capes getting a little bit grubby, perhaps a little bit of an on-the-nose metaphor about the Legion declining towards corruption. It's quite cool to see a couple of different angles on the weapons as well. That axe really does look pretty brutal from this angle, and it does look like both miniatures have a helmeted head option as well. In general, I think they tend to be more popular than the barefaced versions, and again, I think both of them look very effective and Death Guard. Anyway though, let me know what you think of the miniatures down in the comments below. Pretty reasonable updates for the Legion that's busy falling to Nurgle. They really do seem to be doing pretty well with these Horus Heresy Praetors. If you've enjoyed the video and you'd like to keep up with Games Workshop's news and releases, feel free to subscribe to Horus Tactics, where I'll certainly keep the regular 40k stuff coming. Otherwise, if you have been enjoying the content, feel free to check out the links down in the video description. The channel is supported through things like the channel's Patreon page and my Element Games affiliate link for discount 40k miniatures within the UK. Feel free to check either of those out, they both help the channel out and keep these videos coming. In any case, an enormous thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.